Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. My name is Collin Stewart. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Dominic Atkatz. He was the first SDR hire at FLEXE'S. Now he's the SDR manager. And now we're going to talk about how he ramps his SDRs from new hire to phone ready in 2.5 weeks. Dominic, welcome to the show.
Hey, Collin, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. So I'm curious. We got a lot to talk about today. This is an episode that I've been looking forward to recording because, I mean, phone ready in 2.5 weeks is pretty quick. I know I talked to a lot of people that they say they want to get their reps on the phone. Mm-hmm. But it's challenging to have them, you get them on the phone right away, challenging to have them be productive and trust them, so quickly. So I want to understand what the magic is that you guys are doing or that you all are doing and see what we can learn. So talk to me about where does this start? Well, how do you do it? And what's your secret?
Sure. I mean, I think the first things, where it all starts is hiring, but before that, we need to identify, the three keys or the keys to success for a phone call as it applies to our business. And so we've nailed those down into three general categories. One is the ability to ask really good questions. The second is the ability to tell a story in the form of a client case study. And the third is to constantly level set and summarize expectations. And so as we apply that, I like to apply or think of those things in each step of the way of hiring and then onboarding my SDRs.
Okay. So let's talk about hiring briefly, and we don't have to go into your whole hiring process, but it sounds like you've got a part of your process that specifically hones in on phone skills.
Definitely. So, I think the things we've done, we have a 3-step hiring process. The first step is to just generally understand what motivates a person to do really well, especially in a sales role. So I always like asking questions, in my hiring process, at that first phase interview, what do you really want to do in life in your 40s and 50s? Or what is one thing that you dream about buying? Maybe not now, but sometime in the next 10 to 15 years. I just want to, as quickly as possible, understand the currency of the people that I'm potentially managing. And so, the second phase of our interview process, we put our prospects into a test where we can test their levels of passion, not only, in their own lives, but as it relates to Flex, right? How much do they believe in our model? How much does this idea of on-demand warehousing resonate with them? And so the way we do that is we have them identify 7 to 10 accounts that they would reach out to as if they were a Flex SDR. And more importantly, a 1 to 2 bullet point reason for why they chose that account or company to go after. The second thing that we do on that second phase of the interview is we have the SDR candidate pitch us on their favorite app or product with no visual cues. So that just gives us an idea of how good they are at articulating things that they're very passionate about to somebody who has no idea or hasn't heard of those things before. And so that's steps 1 and 2. And then the third step is we have them in for a final interview where we have them give a mock presentation on Flex. So we'll send them a general overview deck that a lot of our account executives give to our clients. And I kind of just leave it pretty open to the SDR as to how they want to go about that process. The reason why I do that is I'm testing for certain things like, okay, how comfortable is this SDR in in a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty. They don't know a whole lot about our model. They don't know a whole lot about me as the mock prospect. What are their levels of engagement before they actually jump into that presentation and deliver it to me? How do they respond to questions that I know they won't know the answer to? So, these are all things that we are constantly striving to get out of our SDRs, is this ability to execute on our sales process during, situations that have a lot of that, that have a lot of uncertainty tied to them.
Cool. So one follow-up question, but I want to ask a quick favor.
Sure.
I can hear either you're hitting the table or maybe your stool's rocking, like maybe you're gesturing with your hands, and
it's probably my hands. I was probably tapping. Yeah, probably tapping.
Like I can hear tap, and I'm like, you know what? I've listened to podcasts before where nobody says anything, and I'm like, damn you! It just distracts from the content. So I thought I'd be that guy that's gonna mention something. So
all good.
Thanks for that.
Yep.
So you mentioned that you had them build the list of 7 to 10 companies. How is that gonna help you understand if they're great, if they're gonna be great on the phone?
That's a good question. So when you go to cold call, because that's where they're spending most of their time on the phone is on a cold call. When you're explaining something that's entirely new to somebody that hates taking cold sales calls, I think like most people do, you got to figure out a way to resonate with them as soon as possible, like within 10 seconds. And the best way that we found to do that is to identify, okay, hey, what are the similar case studies or stories, or what is the use case scenario, or the top 2 use case scenarios of what our product sells, in the eyes of this prospect. And we're going to go out and talk about that. And so that's really what I'm looking for, is this ability to do some really thorough research up front in a scalable manner, so that you can go out and execute a good cold call.
Gotcha. I'm not going to touch on thorough and scalable because that seems like kind of an oxymoron there.
Totally. You're always combating, I think, when you're a high growth e-commerce company, you're always combating that tug of war, right? I want to be really thorough, but I want to do all my research, but at the same time, I need to get my reps up, my repetitions up as fast as possible.
Gotcha. So the next step is sell me your favorite app or product or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the passion and see you're sort of gauging how good are they thinking on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is I want to dig in on is you give them your deck. So this is the deck that you have your reps present on, mm-hmm. and present to customers. And then you have them deliver this deck. So what are you looking for? Like, and if somebody who's applying for your job, they now have, if they've done their research, here's a free pass in that interview, but help us unpack, like, let's understand what goes into that interview and what are you looking for?
Yeah, totally. And to be honest, I tell them what I'm looking for up front. And I just, in that second phase of the interview, I tell them, hey, I'm going to give you a mock presentation and you should engage with me around that presentation before it actually happens. And so I kind of see if they take that offer, or whether or not they take that offer. A lot of SDRs I think they fight this battle with their ego, where they feel somewhat shameful to ask questions that may make them seem ignorant ignorant in the eyes of the prospect. And that's really, in most ways, not the case. Most prospects will know whether or not you know what you're talking about. And so the sooner that you can admit that and level set with them, the better, because trust is everything, I think, in these relationships, especially in the logistics industry, in the industry that we operate in.
Gotcha. So what kind of engagement are you looking to get from the SDRs? Like, what are some can you let me ask you a different question. What does a good, really good engagement look like to you from an SDR candidate?
Sure. So there's 2 levels of that. The first is prior to the presentation. is the candidate reaching out to me and asking me questions about Flex, right? Like, there's a lot of things on our website. I mean, I'm sorry, there's not a lot of things on our website that really explain what we do and how we do it. And so
that's helpful.
Yeah, right. But like it's difficult to understand. And so I think, in a lot of ways it's really important for, it could really help you out if you were to lean on me as a resource. And so it's the same thing here as an SDR, right? Like, you have all the answers you need. You just need to know how to go out and find them. And so that's the first component, is how much engagement am I seeing around, like, well, hey, how do you guys vet your warehouse providers? Or, how does this actually work? And so to get that out of the way is really important. While you're on the interview, while you're at the interview, giving the presentation, just like any good sales presentation, I'm looking for somebody who, will kind of set the lay of the land of the landscape of the segment or industry that we're selling to or selling within. And then pause and ask them, ask questions like, can you tell me a little bit more about how shifting customer buying habits imposes challenges on your team? Or can you tell me a little bit more about, how sales and marketing strategies are, last minute sales and marketing strategies affect, how you go out and design your distribution network. So
you're asking the SDRs this, or you're expecting them to ask?
I'm expecting them to engage with me.
And ask you those questions.
Ask me those questions.
Gotcha.
Right.
I thought you were asking the SDR those questions. I'm like, dude, that's cruel.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Really. So it's like, before they even jump into explaining what Flex is in that portion of the presentation, the best SDR candidates are coming at me, and they know what to do because they've read some sales books, and they know, hey, before I can pitch, I need to understand something about this prospect, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's absolutely critical. The other thing is one question that I love asking at the end of this presentation is just, quite frankly, how do you think you did? And it really, I just realized I'm tapping again, but it really.
I'll do the piano man next time I hear it. Yeah.
But that gives me just an idea of, okay, hey, is this person self-aware? Can they adapt relatively quickly? Do they know where they could improve? I think the nature of a startup is that I try to be as best of a manager as I can, but we look for employees that, just are bootstrappers in a lot of ways, because at the end of the day, you run out of bandwidth to handhold everybody through everything.
Yeah, that's fair. One thing that I've heard, and I've done this a few times. I don't do it in every single one, mm-hmm. But maybe I should. It's when we really want to get to know somebody and see if we're testing. So if I'm the one responsible for testing on coachability, we'll do mm-hmm. something similar. We'll do a role play. I'll stop them partway through and say, this is great. I want you to tweak this one thing. Here's one thing that I think you could improve, and then I'll see how they do on the second try. And most people, and I pulled that out of, I want to say, the sales acceleration formula. This is not my original idea. I stole it from somebody else, just like, lots of books and ideas, but it's not how they do the second time. It's because most people are actually going to do worse, especially in an interview. You're under lots of pressure. Yep. You've just been stopped midstream and been told you're doing something wrong, but you want to see how they handle that piece of feedback, that piece of coaching. So that's something that I do when I'm testing for that piece. And I won't go into our interview process, maybe a different day, but we have sort of, after we go really deep on one, we have these little mini focused interviews that we'll do afterwards. But
sure. Yeah. But in summary, just seeing how they respond to feedback in a pressure packed situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I like it. So before we move on from your hiring process and mm-hmm. talk about once they get hired, is there anything else that you're doing in that process?
In the hiring process, we ask a ton of different questions, but really, I think the keys to success there, it goes back to understanding, hey, what is the model? What is the model employee, or what are the model characteristics of a Flex employee, right? And then being able to categorize each of the questions you ask that relate back to each attribute that you're looking for. So we have 5 major attributes at Flex. We have questions that specifically tie back to each attribute, so that we're checking off each and every box before we move forward.
Gotcha. I like it. All right. So they did a great job on on pitching you their favorite app. They'd ask some great questions. You're like, you know what, let's hire this person. So now that they're hired, you've got 2.5 weeks till go time. What happens next?
So this is when we hand them probably my favorite document. It's our, we have an onboarding milestones sheet. And that sheet basically gives an SDR 3 major milestones with lists of tasks that they need to complete in order to move on to the next milestone. With that, we have timeline expectations for when you should complete each milestone and all the tasks associated with it. And typically they align with, okay, your first month, your first 60 days, and your first 90 days. So that's how we kind of get it started. So yeah,
Great.
I'll pause there.
Interview over. So do a great job hiring, and then give them this checklist, and then let them go.
Totally. Yeah. Just totally let them go. No, but I think, we can unpack some of the things in this checklist. I think the most critical thing to getting someone good on the phone, or getting somebody good at anything, is practice in a live situation. And so we try to get our SDRs on the phone as soon as possible. And the way that we do that is we have them take, they're number 1 on the phone tree for our inbound callers. And at least for our business, the vast majority of our revenue is from outbound prospecting, not inbound prospecting. And so, because of that, the inbound calls give us a lot of information, give the SDRs a lot of at-bats that are relatively low pressure at-bats, but the nature of the conversation is very similar, if not the exact same. And so what we've done is we've created a line of questioning that when somebody calls in, you open up a template in our system where it walks you through, okay, hey, lines of questioning. And then we have, if this, then this. That kind of starts to ingrain in the SDR's head, okay, potential, okay, hey, this is a really good opportunity. Here are some key identifiers for a really good opportunity. Or, I see some red flags here. I should probably start to disengage, right? And that helps them through identifying their next targets, identifying good leads, good contacts, and then also obviously good accounts with that kind of live experience in the back of their head.
Gotcha. So you've got you've got the conversations sort of all mapped out already, and you need to tick these boxes. And so you're essentially within, the first couple of days, you've got them on the phone. They're handling your inbound. You've got this checklist. How much time are they spending on the phone? And then what do they do after that? Are they inbound reps for the first couple of months, or?
No, really what they do is they're the priority reps for the first, I believe it's the first 45 days that they're here. And so actually, instead of time, we do number of reps. So in order to move on beyond that milestone, you need to complete an X number of inbound docs, if that makes sense. And you need to pair that to your milestones sheet, so to speak. And so once we go through those inbound docs, we unpack that with the lead SDRs or the top performing or most tenured SDRs in the team, myself, other members of the company who are very accustomed to early customer client engagement.
Yeah.
And they go through and say, okay, hey, you asked about this, but why didn't you ask this question on the doc? Can you tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking there? It's all about understanding where they get nervous or why they didn't why they did or didn't do something so that we can help them improve in the ways that they want to improve.
Gotcha. So you've actually, instead of just saying time in seat, if you spend 45 days here, then you move on, you've got it geared more towards these are the results that you need to achieve. And if you can do it faster, great. I mean, it adds a bit of variability because sometimes there's a time element. Maybe it was a slow month, you know, and so it's going to take a bit longer. But I imagine if you've got it sounds like you have enough volume that if they really want to hustle, they can hit it.
Exactly. I mean, we probably get at least, anywhere between 15 and 20 inbound calls a day at a minimum.
Okay. So if you're saying hit me with 45 reps, like you can nail that in a couple of days if you really crushed it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that they're doing too is they're listening so you have to shadow SDRs on all of their live meetings and then take notes in adherence to a note-taking template that we've created. And so that gives you used to the pace of taking down crucial information, or actually, let me take a step back, identifying crucial information, writing it down, and then being able to get used to that mode of, okay, I'm writing something down, but I'm also thinking of the next really intelligent question to ask.
Gotcha. And so you've got a quota for number of meetings that you need to essentially book from, or number of calls you need to handle inbound.
Yep.
And the next is you've got a quota for RWFX calls that you need to shadow, where you're taking your own notes.
Yep.
Should we jump into, because I'm curious, it sounds like you're doing some interesting stuff with this note-taking this document here. Do you have something you could share with us?
I do. Now just bear with me for a second.
Okay. So keep in mind, we got about half the audience is watching on YouTube, and so they can see this, and the other half is listening on their phone or in their car.
Sure.
With their headphones in. I'm assuming they have headphones in. Maybe, if you're in your car, maybe not.
Hopefully not. But
that just means they can't see through their headphones. So let's sort of describe this, and then maybe if it's okay with you, we can maybe make a copy, link it to the document or to the bottom of the show notes. So when they do finish driving, they can have a look at what your document looks like.
Sure. And just a fair warning, there's a lot of stuff in here that's very specific to the industry that we're in.
Of course.
And so, I think some of these things are easily transferable across other industries. But that's just my one forewarning here.
Of course. I think that's the best part, is you get to see how everybody personalizes it to their industry, right? To their company. This is not about this is the best doc generic template for everybody, because that document doesn't exist. This is this is where we're at for, where we're at right now.
Right.
For our company. Yep.
Great. So I think I can just outline some general themes of this document. I'm always, I think one of the goals as a manager here is, aside from motivating my SDRs and figuring out what motivates them, it's obviously training. And that's what we're talking about here. And especially when you're selling a product that has a ton of different use cases, it's really important to talk about centralized themes and driving process. And so that's the whole purpose of this doc. And as you can see at the top of the doc, I just I want every SDR, when they go in here, to just level set on what their mindset is. I am always going to be thinking about what we like to call as CANT, most commonly referred into the sales industry as BANT. But always think about those 4 major categories and completing fields in those 4 major categories. Jumping into this doc, I think the thing that we've tried to make it mimic is the flow of our conversations as to how information is generally released by the prospect. And so when we kick off a call, we really start, we like to just get an idea of the state of the business and its current initiatives. And then we start to hone in on how that contact we're speaking with and their division or their business unit is tied to the overall company initiatives. And so, and then that's when we start to talk about, okay, now let's talk industry specific. Let's talk about warehousing in this case. Let's get into what your current solutions are for achieving your initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you can see here, we were just the first part of the call, we're having the prospect basically give us the lay of the land, and we're asking some relatively specific questions, but we're taking notes, not getting super tactical, but just getting kind of just the lay of the land so we can start to uncover opportunities for us to go in and sell.
Okay. And so that's state of business. That's the growth initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're talking about business units, right? And this is sequential. This is the order. This is the flow of the conversation.
Typically. Yep.
Okay. So now we're talking about business units. So
Mm-hmm.
sales channels. What are you trying to understand here?
So we're trying to understand how they're getting product from A to B.
Okay.
Per customer segment.
Gotcha. Okay. So it sort of tells you about the model and how much pain there might be.
Sure.
And then you've got the supply chain network. I imagine this is more talk to me about the pain. We're getting a little bit deeper here.
Yeah, we're basically everything between business units and, all the way down from what we can see on the screen here to components of variability. We're just we're kind of pre-identifying or preheating the pain point, opportunities to identify pain points.
Gotcha. So on these calls, and I know we're diverting a little bit from the topic of how do we ramp, SDRs to
Sure.
Calling in 2 weeks, or 2.5 weeks. But I'm curious here. Is an SDR, one, how long are these calls generally? And
Mm-hmm.
two, so maybe let me ask that. How long are these calls?
So this is a meeting. So obviously cold calls, they last anywhere from a minute to 10 minutes tops, right? But when we're on a meeting, these meetings typically last anywhere between 25 and 45 minutes.
Gotcha.
There's a lot to cover. And so we tend to have a sales cycle that's much longer than most e-com businesses.
And this is this an SDR having this conversation, or is this an AE having this conversation?
It's both, but the SDR is quarterbacking it. So they're communicating with the AE saying, hey, like, we don't have an answer to, what their supply chain network looks like, right? Like, we don't know what their current points of distribution are, whether or not they're self-run, whether or not they outsource them. We need to get that information before we can just blindly start selling Flex or in order to avoid blindly selling.
Gotcha. So
Flex.
Just out of curiosity, this one document is sort of filled out by both your AEs. I guess your SDRs will start it, your inbound people will start it, and then they'll pass it off to an AE.
That's right. I mean, our SDRs go from what I experience, our SDRs go pretty deep into the sales process compared to most SDRs.
Yeah.
Our SDRs cannot be confused with just appointment schedulers. Because our sales cycles are so long, our EEs simply just don't have the time to manage our prospects higher up in funnel stages, even when there's an opportunity identified. And so the SDR needs to understand and figuratively grab the wheel should the AE not be available.
Gotcha.
And so that's really important. I think the one key thing that I haven't mentioned yet, which was a little bit of a failure on our end, but it happened to be one of our biggest learnings, was that we started with telling the SDRs which questions to ask, but then they got very confused when, we jump on a call, the prospect decides to take a different course than what we have scripted. And all of a sudden, I can't ask this one question in the same spot from where it's outlined in the script. And so instead of doing that, we said, hey, here are the answers that you should be looking for and why. That way they can adapt much more feasibly adapt on these calls and ask follow-up questions that follow the course of the conversation. I'm just laughing because I'm just kind of remembering some of our call reviews, but like, we had some new SDRs, jump on Are We a Fit calls, and basically a prospect will tell us we call it a nugget of information where it's like, oh my God, like stop hold the phone right there. We need to ask a why or a follow-up question in direct response to that.
Mm-hmm.
However, they'd let that blow by, and then they'd ask a question that was completely inapplicable to
just checking boxes.
Right. And it was completely inapplicable to what the prospect was talking about. And the prospect was like, hey, are you even listening to me? Like,
yeah,
what's going on? So that was the key. I would say that was the key driver for us switching to this template.
Gotcha. And so this template, because you've got, if for people that can't see it, it's like, it's all questions, right? But then there's a couple of things like, are they at their ideal delivery promise, mm-hmm. right? Which is essentially, that's a gauge for telling, I don't understand your business or your product at all, but mm-hmm. what I'm assuming is there's reality and expectations. And is there sort of a delta between, what you have now and what you want to achieve in the future? And so you've got questions like that sort of spun throughout here.
Exactly.
That I imagine they're going to use to steer the conversation.
Right. Or so what will happen is, I think a lot of these questions in here are quote unquote questions. They're yes, no's in some ways.
Yeah.
And so the idea is to just, okay, an SDR can go in here, and as a prospect is talking about their business, they'll start mentioning things, and they'll mention things like seasonal products, or, hey, our product's still on promotion, or, hey, we just acquired this company and now we need to consolidate our DCs. Or, you know what, a big initiative of ours is we're trying to reduce transportation costs. These are things that we instead of kind of spelling out how to ask the question, we hire our SDRs to be able to do that themselves. Hence the need for an articulate SDR. Cool. But really just telling them in as concise manner as possible, hey, this is the information that we need.
Gotcha. Cool. So I love it. So we've got business units, supply chain network, components mm-hmm. of variability within supply chain. So again, these are all pain, I guess, nuggets, and then sort of like within components of variability, you talked about seasonal products, products that sell on promotion. So these are all things that they could be doing that would give you an indication that, hey, there might be some pain here. Right. Typical warehousing needs. Now you're moving into deal sizing. So are we talking about you need 6 boxes a year, or 400,000 pallets capacity kind of stuff?
Sure. Yep.
Cool.
Are we talking about doing fulfillment to a wide range of consumers, or are we just talking about hosting seasonal overflow? Right. It can go in a whole lot of different directions, and
gotcha.
This template helps it boil down.
Opportunity sizing. So it's like you're trying to figure out the pain. Now we're trying to figure out how big is the opportunity.
Right.
So after sizing or warehousing needs, where are we going next?
Yeah. So, for most of this, we've been if we're going to think about BANT, this is all around the need, right? This is mostly just collecting information around a need or potential need. And so as we head down towards the end of the call, or the Are We a Fit call, we start to look at, okay, what are the alternatives to Flex in this situation, right? So
yeah.
What are your past solutions? So we actually call that, this is why we've replaced B with C. So we call that the cost of alternatives. Generally speaking, our product is a necessity to any company. They may not use us, but whatever they do, they need to use something,
mm-hmm.
Or one of our competitors. So budget was kind of one of those things where it just didn't do you have the budget to spend for this product? Well, we're a need to have, not a nice to have.
Yeah.
So we replaced it with, okay, hey, how do we compare to, how do the costs of Flex and, from both a time and money perspective compare to the alternatives in the industry? And so that's what we're really trying to figure out towards the back half of the call here.
Gotcha.
As you can see on this note-taking template, as we get towards the end of the call, the SDR is like, okay, gosh, I need to start to wrap all of this information I've collected together and mm-hmm. identify for the follow-up meeting, what do we need? What are the questions that we need to answer under the C category? What are the questions that we need to answer under the authority category? hey, we may be talking to a warehouse manager who can spill all the beans about the business, but they're not going to be able to press the green light on whether or not they're going to buy Flex, right? So identifying, okay, who are the other people who are involved with the decision-making process? Is that something that we can tackle on this call, or is that something that we're going to have to make a key initiative for the next call? So yeah, that's just as you get towards the bottom, this is sort of aligns with the course of these calls and how they play out.
Gotcha. Cool. And then you've got the map out next steps.
Mm-hmm.
And what else do we have left? That's the doc?
Yeah, that's the doc. I mean, that's the general overview doc. We have a specific segment of our business. It's a very large component of our business. That's we have more tactical questions below here.
Okay.
And so generally speaking, those are very specific scenarios, and we have the key thing that we've done, we've segmented our teams. What I showed you here was more of our enterprise approach, where you could have multiple use case scenarios at play, overflow, retail distribution, and e-commerce fulfillment. If it's just e-commerce fulfillment, they just focus on those questions when they're talking about that lay of the land kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. So I feel like we did take about a 10-minute, 15-minute diversion into the note-taking template. Mm-hmm. And so let's tie this back into, once they're hired, what's next? So at this stage, we've gotten our SDRs or your SDRs on the inbound, right? And they've got to get, you said 45 reps, so they got to take 45 calls or take notes on 45 calls. Then they've got a quota for the number of AWAF calls they need to shadow, right? And so the AE is sort of going through the doc and they're taking notes at the same time. And so they're going through these independently. Now what's next?
So I just wanted to slight correction. We don't make the SDRs go through 45 inbound calls.
Okay.
It really actually doesn't take that many for them to get it.
Okay.
Especially when you combine that with the fact that they're shadowing meetings. And I can leave this. This is a good segue into another thing that we do. We record our calls. And so, with some of our client interactions, we record our calls. And for those, we do that for, training purposes. I sound like it's true. And it's such a crucial component to our training process because we, on a weekly basis, not just for our new hires, but for all of our SDRs, we review 3 to 5 calls rather, and how those calls adhere to our process and our script and this note-taking template. And so one of the things that an SDR does is they actually take, they listen to a recorded call, and they have the note-taking templates that are completed by the SDR who was on that recorded call, and they evaluate the SDR's performance. Hey, did you note that this quote unquote nugget was mentioned on this call? Or, hey, there was probably a follow-up question that deserved to be asked here. And so what we do is we review those new candidate call reviews together as managers and as leads on the team. So we ensure that they are on the right page with getting an understanding of what drives success on these calls.
But I'm curious, it sounds like you've got a really detailed call plan note-taking plan for while you're on the call. Do you do anything sort of pre-call?
Yeah, so that note-taking template aligns with our pre-call outlines. And so we have 2 major pre-call outlines. I can share them with you in just a sec. But the first one let me just take a step back. There's 2 scenarios in which you use, there's 2 scenarios and for which you use each of those 2 templates. The first one is if you are an enterprise SDR. So we have digital native SDRs that focus on high growth e-commerce startups, and we have enterprise SDRs that focus on Fortune 500, 1000s, global Inc. 5,000 companies. The first call our first Are We a Fit pre-call outline aligns with a customer engagement where you haven't had the ability to gather that much information prior to the call. Typically our enterprise SDRs, they don't want to risk screwing up a client interaction, so to speak, with that profile of a prospect or high profile prospect. And so they end up just setting up the call and doing some basic research that aligns with, how we want to aligns with the information that we want to gather prior to the call. So I can show that version right now if you'd like.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Okay.
We used to do almost exactly the same thing with we literally had a AWF template in a Google Doc, and it was chaos.
So funny you mentioned that, Collin. I know you recommended this to me. We are figuring out a way through, if you want, I could plug the name of the app in the podcast here, but
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So we're working with a company, or we're trying out a company called Doolly, Dooly. And what they're doing is we're taking that pre-call out, that note-taking template and assigning it to opportunity phases in our sales force. And so theoretically, an SDR and our AEs cannot move a client opportunity to the next phase without all the respective note-taking template fields completed. So that's really going to clear up the ambiguity for an SDR and our AEs for what is a qualified project and what is a disqualified project. So just a heads up there. We're moving away from Google Docs and the the linked nightmare they can kind of create.
I've got I'm very, very quick at Command T, and then I'd set my Chrome shortcut to hit Drive tab and then customer name, and just hope that Google Drive loads it fast enough for me to try and track it down and find it. But we ended up in just a nightmare spider web of documents, and just I know all the information is there, but it's lost, right?
There's nothing worse than that.
Yeah, I know where it is, but I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours recreating, copying and pasting for calls that are a year or 2 years old. It's gone.
Totally.
Whereas what I love about what you're doing with Doolly, we've done the same thing, but not quite as advanced. I'm looking forward to checking out how you guys do it. But basically we just made sections in our on the opportunity and account object that sort of get filled in as they progress through our sales process. And we have different sections for different calls, so that when you look at the opportunity, you can say, okay, well, what did we cover on the first call? Okay, What did we cover on the second call? And the beautiful thing is you can pull all these templates into your Doolly template, so it looks just like you're in Evernote, which is the thing that I just loved, because I hated going back. And I loved Google Docs, and it was so hard to pull the team out of Google Docs because it is the easiest, but it just created this huge mess, and all the data was gone.
Right. Yeah, no, it's almost like they made it too easy to to create and recreate. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shoot, I have so much and I don't know where it is.
So many Google Docs, and they're all lost, and somebody forgot to share one folder, and now, Sarah's left and all of those docs are gone.
Right. And, the other really cool thing about Doolly, and we'll won't spend too much more time on this, but
this segment brought to you by.
Yeah, exactly. But the other really awesome thing is that when you start talking about a topic and you write that topic down, Doolly can pull in objective, things like objective handling statements, or, hey, here are the other things that you can sell on this topic in relation to your business. So we can kind of splice in our sales enablement material into their note-taking templates, which is
amazing.
It's quite cool. There was a lot more there than I thought that you would initially pitch me on, so I was pleasantly surprised.
Well, I actually haven't used that. I haven't used that piece of it quite yet. I didn't know about it.
It's really they took it to a whole nother level with us this week on a demo.
Dude, that's very cool. I'm excited. I'll have to check that out myself.
Yep.
Okay, so That section was not brought to you by Dooley. We just fans. So let's go through the pre-call outline, and then let's close this out, because I think we've been yammering on for about an hour. People are probably sick and tired of hearing us talk.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to go over this really quick, but I think it's way more important to go over the follow-up call outline. But this one's pretty basic. I mean, I think most people could set this up or would set this up, just on their own accord. But the whole point of this is I'm trying to save my SDRs time wherever I can. And so I actually bake this into a template that they can pull by composing a message in Gmail, which is our email provider. So they create this screen and they're like, okay, hey, these are all the things that my AEs or the VP of sales would be the most concerned about knowing about prior to jumping on the call. I think one of the SDR's biggest challenges at any role that they weren't maybe expecting when they got hired was how much internal selling they have to do in a startup environment. And so this is just one component of internally selling better to AEs that are constantly busy.
Gotcha. So you're setting this up in Google, because Google's got that. It's a Google Labs feature. You can just add the canned responses in. Is that what you're doing? Or do you have something like Outreach or something?
I'm using Outreach, and
cool.
we're using Outreach and templates and Outreach to do that.
Cool. So you basically, for those that can't see what we're talking about, he's got like scheduled time, date and time of the call, account website, URL, prospect, title. Oh, hang on a sec. This is not what you're going to send to the,
This is what you're sending to the AE prior to the call.
To the AE prior to the call. Okay. Gotcha.
And myself as the SDR manager. So I can see, hey, this is a new SDR. I want to make sure that their mind's in the right place as it pertains to this specific business that they're speaking with.
Gotcha.
So it's just one more layer of visibility, spot check visibility. As a manager of 8 people, I also am somewhat of an individual contributor. So it's like, I need a way to process information really quickly and make sure that everybody's on the same page and onboarding, in the right way.
That's cool. We did something with the tool we mentioned previously. We added at the bottom of the SDRs template, what are the top 3 priorities, right? Mm-hmm. For the prospect, stack rank them in order. And then at the top of the account execs template, we had it automatically fill in what the SDR wrote, so they can start the call with, hey, I know you had a conversation with Pete. Here's what he said your top 3 were. This is what I know about the account. And so now we're starting from, we're not starting from ground zero. We're starting from, halfway down.
Mm-hmm. And just to align with, at the beginning of this call, I outlined the 3 keys to success on the calls, right? It's asking the right question at the right time, dropping the right case study at the right time, and it's level setting on the expectations. And so this pre-call outline also aligns with that. And, especially as it pertains to, okay, hey, what are the forecasted use cases for this specific business? And what are the applicable client case studies that we should be prepared to talk about on the call?
Gotcha.
So that's super crucial that we get those right. And then obviously context for how you got in touch, how pushy this prospect's going to be, about timeline, how much they want to talk high level and how much they want to talk tactical. This is also really important stuff that is disclosed in this pre-call outline.
Gotcha. And you said the follow-up outline or the follow-up call template was the most important one?
Yeah, I just popped over to it, if you can see it now.
Okay. Yeah.
So first thing we talked about, okay, setting expectations was that third thing that was really important. So,
and this is sent SDR to AE or AE to prospect?
SDR to AE. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the SDR and the AE work together as to what they want to send to the prospect prior to the call.
Okay.
In general, yeah. So key deliverable for that was due for this call on FLEXE'S end, and then also on the prospect's end, right? Like, hey, did you show up with what we needed here? If so, great. If not, okay, do we need to schedule a follow-up time, or how can we help you get to giving us this information?
Gotcha.
That was a very common thing that comes up for us, is getting prospects to give us the information that will help us help them. So, things you have on here are the goals of the call. Now the goals kind of turn into, okay, we're really thinking of can'ts, right? Or bans in most companies' cases. But did I get enough clarity around their cost of alternatives, or do we really know who the decision maker is here? We heard them mentioning, I got to run this back to my group of people and then schedule another follow-up call, right? Like, is this really true? the needs and the key initiatives, like, again, that's obvious. That's what the entire note-taking template, the first half of it, accomplishes, that we talked about on this call. And then timeline, not just timeline, and it's not necessarily, I don't think it's written in here, but it's timeline for next step, timeline for, the project, and then, then you establish, okay, timeline of what the prospect has to do for us next.
Gotcha.
Or decision-making date, and then project live date.
I follow you. Yeah. And so we go from timeline. Now the next section here is like key pain points.
Yep. So
simplicity, scale, visibility.
Those are our three. Yeah, those are our three value props, right?
You're sort of highlighting which one is, it was most appealing to them.
Please, exactly. Prioritize the value props of Flex in the eyes of the prospect. So we know which one to spend more time on, and which one to just be like, you know what, this is not applicable in this conversation.
That's great. And so the last one is deal killers. Exactly.
These are the things that the AE should be ready to combat on the call. Hey, I need, I don't know if any of the listeners have read The Challenger Sale, but it's, alongside Predictable Revenue, it's another book that we love to have everybody read.
Big fan. We actually our Rev team just finished reading it. We have like a Rev team book club, and that was the one that we just read or finished reading and talked about yesterday.
Awesome.
Big fans.
Yeah. So especially when you're bringing a disruptive idea or model into an industry, you have to take that challenger approach. And in order for a company to work with you, they're going to have to sacrifice something. And these are generally some of the things that they might have to sacrifice. And so it's kind of, okay, preparing the AE and the SDR to know how they're going to handle that challenger process. Gotcha. Super important. You don't want to have to do that on the fly if you can avoid it.
Okay. And the last section here, sort of key questions that we need to answer. Okay. So basically, here's the areas that we're going to get stuck on. And then here's some red flags to make sure that we're not setting up crap calls.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And then this blast section, I'll have to say, will probably go away with Dooley. So
you're really going to enjoy it once everything is all like mapped to your opportunity object. We made the shift about a year ago, and it took us a while to get our templates up, but yeah, it was just, now everything is just so much cleaner, and we still have lots of work to do. We're still going to create more templates. We're getting deeper and deeper. I really should get those Dooley guys to sponsor this or pay for us because we talk so much about them.
Maybe a ski trip up to Whistler or something, since we're both in the Pacific Northwest.
I think so. We'll have to chat to the founders there. I normally try and keep, stuff vendor agnostic, but yeah, we've just, I haven't done a great job this call.
Well, I'm just so giddy. you can probably tell, but I'm pretty giddy about it, just because we spend a lot of time as managers, both sales teams, understanding, gosh, hey, what happened to this deal? There was an identified opportunity, but it's not moving. Mm-hmm. Why? And how do we prevent this from happening? And so we found that it was just down to us not gathering all the key components of information that we needed to know to move forward, or moving forward too quickly.
Exactly. So if we can tie it back to the how you're able to get a rep up and running in 2 weeks, mm-hmm. It sounds like you've got a predefined onboarding, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got the milestones mapped out. It sounds like you do a lot of coaching, right? You're on the call, you're listening to their calls, you're doing lots of shadowing. So you get a chance. You're like 3 to 5 calls a week. That's a lot. You must be just listening to, your chorus and gong calls all day long.
All day long.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And then you're getting them to sort of do this, like train. And then I guess outside of, or sort of a level above the note taking, is that you've got everything so well documented and proceduralized that it almost creates, very, very, a very plug and play system.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you got to be able to scale, and you, at the same time, like we talked about at the beginning of the call, it's that tug of war of being really thorough, but also scaling, simultaneously. How do you get there? And so for me, I think that one of the things that I I saved myself a lot of time on as I was the first SDR here was I wrote everything down, and I'm an athlete, and I've been an athlete where I've been the worst person on the team and worked my way up, and I couldn't do that without a process. And so, that was one of those things where it's like, gosh, if I can implement a process for everything here, it's going to make it so much easier to understand if you're doing well and benchmark yourself, against other SDRs. And bringing in competition is, another component of this that I get really excited about. So I put up challenges to new SDRs saying, hey, so-and-so completed their onboarding milestone in 2 weeks. Do you think you can beat that? See what happens. So that's
how you do it.
That's how I do it. Yeah.
You've got great coaching. Everything's documented, proceduralized, and then you inspire the spirit of competition.
Totally.
Very cool. I want to, we went into such great detail. I really want to thank you. I got 2 questions left for you before we call it. One, what's your favorite, we kind of covered favorite SDR interview question, didn't we? But
I can see which one. Yeah, we kind of did.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that being, getting them to pitch. Do you have a specific question that you like? Gives you a lot.
It gives me a lot. Man, have me pick just one is tough. It depends what phase of the interview they're in. But if it's the first one, I love saying there's 2 of them. One, can you give me an elevator pitch of the most recent company or you've worked for? And 2, why Flex? Like what has you passionate to apply here? What light bulbs went off in your head when you read about us? I think the one thing that maybe outside of a question, maybe a mentality as an interviewer is, it's almost more important to ask less first questions and then ask follow-up questions as like why or what or how than it is to get through
at a time.
Right. And then digging in to see, it's kind of like getting them started in that objection handling process, and understanding, okay, hey, how thorough can you get on the fly without being overly wordy?
Great. I like it. We're big fans of Who, the book, in terms of for hiring process. It's been a big shift, and I'd say the open-ended questions and getting them to tell stories is the number one thing that sort of helped us get better and improve our hiring process. So wrapping up this, our interview, I think we've done a really thorough job. But I want to get to the final segment. Like I said, I'd promised you an opportunity to sort of pitch your business. So we come to my favorite segment called Cold Call Me. So
cold call you.
Yeah. So gotcha. We can role play a cold call. I'll try and I'll throw some objections at you. I'm not going to be nice. So you've got, you want a minute? Are you ready?
Let's see here. I want to go, for the sake of my SDRs who listen to the Predictable Revenue podcast every week, I better follow the script here.
Wait. You can't pull the script out. You got to know the script. You can't. That's cheating.
You think it's cheating?
You want to Dominic's? Yeah. If he's coaching you on this, he should know this off by heart, right? And they're all going,
Yeah. Well, maybe you can tell if I'm going to be using the script or not. But
we'll find out. Okay.
So, Collin, let me ask you a question.
Well, I haven't done. The phone hasn't rang yet. Come on, man.
Well, I got to figure out who you're working for.
All right, fine. So, set the stage. Who am I?
Who do you want to be? I just need
make me beautiful.
Okay. So, how about you're a what's a popular Canadian retailer?
Lululemon.
Lululemon, sure. Okay, cool. So you are I'm going to assume you're the VP of Supply Chain at Lululemon.
Okay.
I'm good.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Ring, ring. Hello, this is Collin.
Hey, Collin. You've probably never heard from me before, but I was wondering, is now a bad time to talk? My name is Dominic, and I'm calling from Flex.
Yeah, it's a bad time. I'm just about to go into a meeting.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. Hey, I'm totally sorry to bother you. But is there a better time I can reach out?
Nope.
Darn. Well, do you know what Flex is?
Nope. But I'm going in a meeting. You've got 10 seconds before I hang up.
Sure. So we are the most agile solution to warehousing. And I was just curious if you guys ever experience variable situations where it's very hard to predict when and where you need to have your product.
I'd say our supply chain's pretty fleshed out. We're Lululemon. We're an international company.
Sure. Yeah. So, we've worked with a lot of companies, for example, Tom's Shoes, who frequently have marketing initiatives, sales initiatives that come up that really put a strain on their distribution network. Hey, you may gather a lot of customers, but your margins may not be that great. And your entire operations team is putting out fires as a result of it. And Flex really makes it a whole lot easier to handle those last minute situations, but on a long-term basis. So I know you're heading into a meeting, but I wanted to be conscious of your time, but I was just curious if this at all comes up for you.
Interesting. I want to hear from your SDRs and see how they'd rate your cold call. How do you think you did?
How did I think I did? So it's a good question. I think I did okay. I'd give myself probably like a B.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to hear from your SDRs. Sure. I think the content's there. Yeah. Let's do some coaching. I'll give you a couple tips and we'll try it again.
Yeah, sure.
No, I'm kidding. I don't want to
God.
You.
One of those things is that I'm always game for constructive feedback. So you have your meeting with my note-taking template ready to go.
Perfect. All right, Dominic, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This was lots of fun.
Hey, Collin, appreciate it. Hope to see you soon.
Sounds good, man. Well, hopefully we'll catch up sometime, talk about the Dooley notes thing. And if we hear from people that said, hey, you talked about Dooley too much, then we won't do a follow-up. It'll just be you and me. But if everybody's like, hey, we want to hear how Dominic did, then drop me a line, shoot me an email, hit me up on LinkedIn, and let me know, hey, I want to hear what Dominic has done to get out of Google Docs, and we'll make another video specifically going through that in detail. And if I don't hear from anybody, then we won't waste everybody's time.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks again, Dominic.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Yeah.